We are live. So, welcome anyone who might be here or watching later to the Incredulous, Irreligious, Cogdiss Skeptic Zone Guide. Oh my god, I said it. Hangout. Got it right. So,
Good,
today
excellent.
is, yes, Mike Bowler, everyone. I think Lauren's probably too busy chasing or being chased by a bear right now in the middle of Canada. Johan and Erno were, I guess Erno was working and Johan is migrating. I didn't realize that apparently in Sweden everyone migrates in the summer. I'm a little jealous.
Kind of a
But
nice deal.
yeah, I'm like, he was telling me that. I was like, yeah, well, I've been sleeping on my couch a lot lately just because, but I don't have anywhere else to go to. So
Uh,
today's topic was actually science versus politics. We talk about that or continue talking about, we've been chatting a little bit before we started the live broadcast about the whole NSA surveillance debacle, if you will. I don't know if we have a whole lot else to say about it. It's certainly interesting, but I guess I kind of try and meter how much of any one particular news story I pay attention to. Some years ago, probably oh, we'll say 4 years ago, even I was I was pretty diligent about reading a lot of news stories every day and um, watching if there was a news broadcast I thought worth watching. I'd watch that and think about it and discuss it a lot with my family and my friends. And finally, I just said, I got to take a little bit of a step back and not worry too much about everything around me. Which is not to say I want to put my head in the sand, but at the same time, it's like I can't walk around upset about every crazy thing I read or see or hear because there's a lot of it, and it can certainly overwhelm you. Or at least me, it could. So,
well, the way the news is these days, it's like they'll latch onto a story. Whatever big happened, they latch onto it, and then they run it for the next two days, really not telling you anything new. I mean, when like with the Sandy Hook shooting, I mean, it was like for hours it was the same thing over and over again.
right.
Maybe a slight adjustment in the body count, but that was, I mean, what sense is it to watch the news anymore?
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember with the Boston Marathon bombing, and also with more recently with the one of the Oklahoma tornadoes we had. Like, you sort of watch the newscasters, and they're talking about something like you said, body count or some other details, and they'll get some detail that I swear it's like they heard somebody passing on the sidewalk say something, and they report it, and then maybe later they have to go back and be like, oh, never mind that what we said. Um, I think that comes from a lot from like I guess especially the television news media is very much driven by ratings. They make their money through advertising, so the more people they have watching,
Right.
pretty simple how that works. So say something we can retract it later if we have to, but say something that's going to catch people's attention. I guess that's total conjecture. I don't really know how those decisions are made for um, how journalists what they pick and choose to broadcast. That seems to make sense to me, and I don't mean that to sound like big evil corporation, though I could argue that as well, but that's beside the point. Like I just think that's the business model they have. They need people to be watching to make their money, so it doesn't entirely surprise me they do things like that. Um,
Well, actually, I think that's pretty accurate because I mean, you'll see how like even the locals, they'll put they always put the bad news first. It's the catcher. It hooks you in. Then so I mean, the old standard, if it bleeds, it leads. You
mhm.
know, so the bigger body count, the worse damage, that gets first, and then down the line. I mean, that's been the standard. I mean, no matter what station, whatever station you listen to, what networks you're listening to, that's what you're going to get.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's and even those, and there's been, and I think also if it's part of a, oh, like, well, the big thing about gun control now after Sandy Hook, there always has to be a story about a shooting somewhere. I mean, you listen to news in Chicago, and it seems like they're always talking about some gang. It's always gang. Every day there's a new gang shooting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so it's all. I think it's all kind of, I don't know, programmed. That whatever the big topic or the big thing on everyone's mind. Put as much in front of you as they can.
Right. I know here. I assume it's pretty similar everywhere, but our local news here in Oklahoma City, years ago when I stopped watching the local news, I would complain that the basic formula was the news comes on, what's the big somebody got shot, somebody got hit in a car accident, someone got robbed story, followed by I think it was that, and then sports and weather, and then some feel-good story, and then somewhere in the middle they'll do like a 30-second world news blurb. And I remember one time sitting there talking to a friend of mine. He's sitting in my living room, and the news was on, and I was half paying attention to it while I was having this conversation. I started getting, I was irritated by the news because I realized they've spent the last, 5-7 minutes of their half-hour broadcast talking about a local story about some guy that picks up dog poop for a living. That's what, like, he had a business where he picks up dog poop, which, hey, good on him. I don't like picking up dog poop either, so I suppose if I had the money, maybe I'd pay someone to do it. I don't know, but I thought, is there nothing better? Is there nothing more important in the world that we could be talking about than some guy who picks up dog poop for a living? And that's a big problem I have with the entirety of the newscast. Okay, so, John and Jane Doe got in a car wreck or hit a bicyclist downtown and drove off. We're going to talk about that for 10 minutes and show you as much of the gore as we're able to without offending anyone, And it's like, why do I need to see that? Like, why are there not bigger, more important things going on that have a larger impact on our lives? So, when I realized that, that kind of thing was irritating me so much, I said, well, it's time to turn off the local news. I don't ever see the local news anymore. The only time I will ever see it is in a severe weather incident, Because that one thing I can say that we have here in Oklahoma is some of the best weather reporting in terms of like severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. The National Weather Service, they're located just south of where I live by about 30 miles, and we do a really good job of reporting things like that here. The newscasters here, the meteorologists here do. Although I do joke about that. I say, it's funny that here you got this meteorologist on TV and he's waving his arms, he's all excited talking to these guys who are out in the field. But every warning they give, when they confirm a tornado, it's all the National Weather Service is saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, so what I think it is like there's nobody there at the National Weather Service that they feel like, hey, we could put this guy on TV for us. It's like, no, we're all going to stay off camera and we'll pass this on to somebody else that's better suited for it.
Right.
But yeah, I guess my parents watch, I think it's MSNBC, which I remember telling my dad one time, because my parents have both complained about Fox News, how terrible Fox News is, and I said, you guys watch pretty much the polar opposite of Fox News. It's the same thing. It's just they're towing a different party line. My dad kind of thought for a second. He's like, "Yeah, I guess you're right." They just do. That's the exact same ploy. It's the same kind of shows. It's just a different slant is all. So I don't watch any of that.
Yeah.
I tend to get my news. I guess I tend to get my news online. I'll go find different news sources online to read or occasionally watch videos. So.
Yes, that's what I've been doing, and doing stuff for podcasts. I've been I can't spend all hours watching a news program or trying to plow through a couple websites, for news, and really a lot of the times it's. It is pretty cool when you're in a different town. You watch their local news. You kind of get a feel for what the issues are, and because like here in Detroit, I mean, I guess the big thing is that Detroit's going broke, and they're like inches away from filing bankruptcy. They're trying to, Chicago. It seems to be the gang problem. They've been having a rash of gang shootings, kids shooting kids, basically. Because and then when I was in California, it was water. I mean, there was the water shortages between drought and I guess the lakes are running dry out there.
Hmm.
So just even when I was in Iowa, the was hog farming. It was like each town has its own. They got their little problems, their little issues, and you kind of get a feel for them watching the local news. So I mean, I'll do that, but beyond that, it's like if I well, like I'm doing the bitch spot report, so I'm having to look up religious articles. It's like I go to I'll just do Google searches on religious news, and it puts me right where you know directs me right where I need to be instead of having to. Okay, there's no religious news here on CNN. There's none here on Fox. There's none on you know this channel or that channel.
Hmm.
So, and like I said, I kind of given up on. It was actually back in when I was into shortwave listening. I mean, it was funny listening to the news out of Russia. I don't know if you remember or heard of the disco demolition in Chicago.
I'm not sure that that rings a bell.
It has 70 something,
Hmm.
78, 79, I think. One of the local radio shock jockeys decided to at a Chicago's White Sox game, and they set up a disco demolition night where if you brought in a disco record and for what was like $1, what was it $1.97 because it was FM 97, they would for a disco record and $1.97 you can get in and watch a baseball game, and then it was a double header, and then in between the two games they were going to blow up all these disco records.
What could
And
possibly go wrong?
well, everything went wrong. It was actually a major. Yeah, they blew this up, and everyone started throwing records on the field. And see, the funny thing was, I actually could have gotten free tickets to go see that. Actually, I got the free tickets, but I decided not to go for some reason. I think I had homework or something I had to get done. So my dad and my brothers went, and so here you got kind of a straight-laced, father with his two young, with three little kids there, all around these uh, teenagers plus smoking marijuana, and my dad was like, it was just the smell was just thick. Everyone was stoned, drunk. Next thing you know, after they blew up the records, people started throwing stuff into the field. Then they started jumping down onto the field and started tearing up the bases. They tore up the field, and they ended up having to cancel the second game because the field was just too damaged. And then seeing that play out on on the local news, and at the time I was listening to Radio Moscow, and they were talking about a riot that broke out in a sports event in Chicago, and I'm like, okay, maybe they're kind of right, but it was. I started checking some, like the BBC. I would check some of these other stations, and they were like, the communists were like, oh, everyone's going, you know, there's riots breaking out in Chicago, and it's like, okay, no, it's just inside a baseball, the old Comiskey Park. So it
They
was
were just
kind of,
doing the same thing we did to them.
yeah, yeah.
The commies eat babies.
Right. So it was like, so that it was pretty much obvious, depending on what you're thinking, your point of views, your political whatever, it's going to dictate what you're going to, what you're going to put up on your TV shows and your news programs and how, basic propaganda, type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
I was just thinking a minute ago. Now, since I don't watch the local news anymore, so I don't know that it's maybe it's changed. But when I did watch the local news, there was never anything that was like a hot button topic here in Oklahoma City, or any particular one thing that was always being addressed. I guess a problem we've had pretty consistently here for years is um, meth production, like methamphetamine production. But it never really, I doubt it does now, never got a whole lot of airtime. I guess just because of, saying, hey, we produce more crystal meth here than anywhere else in the country probably isn't what everyone wants to hear. In
Right.
fact, yeah, I mean, there would certainly be a story here and there, and we've had tornadoes and the bombing and all that, but after those die down, there's nothing like any one thing. Not like where like you have Chicago where there's always gang shootings or something. Yeah, we have shootings here, and we even have gang shootings here sometimes, but they're just not that terribly common. Um, yeah, I don't really know. I guess something they could report about all the time is the god awful road conditions. We have, I swear, like I always tell people, I know when I get back to Oklahoma when I'm on a road trip because the road noise gets loud, and the car starts shaking. Like, I've crossed the border.
I always got a
Have
kick.
the most terrible roads here. It's awful.
Well, there's I remember. Oh man, this was when I was working in Iowa, and they came out with a report with the ranking of states by roads from best to worst, and Iowa was 49 and Illinois was 50, and
Wow.
I'm like,
I'm amazed that I'm amazed that we haven't made the top of that list every year. Maybe we have. I don't know. I haven't. I know that I've seen lists like that in a long time.
yeah, because I was like, well, when I was in North Carolina, I mean, the roads were beautiful down there. I mean,
Yeah, I have to
uh,
look it up.
yeah, because it's like Iowa in the well, I was working in Keokuk, Iowa, and I think the numbers were based on per capita dollars spent per mile type of thing, and I forget what it was, but I mean, you go to Iowa, there was places after the '96 flood when the Mississippi flooded. There's like roads just totally wiped out. I mean, just bridges just washed away, and it was like I was there 88 or 98, 99, and they hadn't even began to think about fixing or replacing those bridges. It's like what the and see like Illinois, I don't know. They don't seem to like to spend money on road. They have no problem building them, but they don't seem to want to maintain them afterwards. I think you're mute again.
I have to stop doing that or something. People I know will kind of rhetorically ask, why don't they spend more money fixing the roads around here? What are we paying our taxes for? Blah blah blah. And I tell people you have to remember if you travel to a densely populated city, like I imagine like Chicago or Dallas, or I can think of a few other places, but Dallas is a good example because something I can say about Texas is for the most part they have really good roads, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they take really good care of them. But I tell people, like that's so densely populated, so per square mile you have more tax dollars per square mile than you have here in Oklahoma City, which I think Oklahoma City, area-wise, is the second largest city in the country. Don't quote me on that for sure, but it's one of the larger cities, like area-wise, in the country, and not very populated for as large as it is. So there you have. Some areas are going to get more attention than others, and there are parts of Oklahoma City that just like, this is a road. It's like, what is this? someone threw pieces of asphalt down here 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a viewer. Oh, we had a viewer. Oh, they left. We bored them.
Oh.
Oh well. Screw you, guy. Hey, it's your birthday today, isn't it?
Yes, it's my birthday. Big 5-1.
Woohoo! Happy birthday. Got any big plans to celebrate?
I've got some cold pizza.
That is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I think for my birthday this year, I think I celebrated by playing video games on Xbox Live with my friends. That was about it.
Yeah, I was gonna kick back. I'm gonna warm up some pizza, see what kind of movies are on, maybe turn something on Netflix, and
So on our actual topic, I guess, do you have any particular science versus politics points that you want to discuss?
not really. I mean, just the general. I mean, with the funding, you know, I mean, all the cutbacks in NASA and all the the what you call them, the research funding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that seems to be the big thing.
Well, there's certainly no shortage of funding for scientific discovery on how to better kill people.
Right.
That's big business. So.
Yeah. Or to spy on us.
Right.
You don't get the NSA. But when it comes to regular, because that seems to be it's what's bugging me most is that when I heard about the biggest industry that in the United States has been specialty textiles. We have we're the number one producer of like Kevlar, some of these specialty fabrics, and that's it. And even on top of that, we send it overseas to turn them into vests and bulletproof vests and stuff like that. It's like we need something more technological or something. Because all our industry's gone overseas and all that kind of good stuff. So and it's going to take some scientific, it's going to take scientific research, and if it means the government's going to have to, to discover some new science or something to spur on some technology to give us something to produce. I mean, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you one thing I'm looking forward to. Next week we should have some of the guys in here talking about. We'll have part 2 of this because they're going to be able to attend, and those are some of the guys that are over in Europe, and I'm interested to see how what their take on science versus politics in their country is versus how we see it here. Because we'll see a lot of very like fundamentalist religion um, creeping its way into politics. A big one being uh, the teaching of creationism and evolution in public schools. Um, there again is another example of not tooting the horn of my state so much. Like I don't particularly love it here, but that's another thing. It's like I was never taught creationism in school. I went to a public school here in Oklahoma, and they never taught us creationism in public schools here. I guess there are public schools around the country that want to do that, and here legislators are pushing for that to have equal play. I don't know. It seems to me it's like that has to just be playing to their constituencies,
yeah,
or to the
Ohio,
constituents.
there's Ohio school districts trying to do that. Actually, we talked about it on the Bitch Spot report. Apparently, the school board is, and they're seriously thinking of introducing. It's that teach the controversy plan by whatchamacallums, the Discovery Institute. Teach the controversy,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's what they're thinking of doing. And it's like, and they're not, it sounds like it may actually pass, or at least this board, and it's like, don't these people realize that that's not, you can't do that, and it's going to open them up for lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I don't know, that's, people just don't think, or maybe they don't know. I mean, anything's possible these days.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to say. It like for me, it'd be easy to assume that. I don't know. Like in that case, for instance, it'd be easy for me to assume what people there and that the voters in those districts think, or what they don't think, or what the legislators think or don't think. But it comes down to it, that's just me making an assumption. I don't really know. I'm not there. I'm well removed from it.
Yeah.
And even here locally, when some decisions are made, when you see issues where politics seems to butt up against science, I guess it harkens back to what we were saying earlier about the news media. The news media tells us, oh, here's what people in this area think. Well, do they really? Like, how many people did you talk to? And of those people, how many of them were likely going to give you a particular answer that may or may not have played well?
Yeah.
I guess I'm dubious when it comes to reports of, Americans tend to think X, because when Americans tend to think something in a poll, we live in a country of 350 million people, and if you polled even just 10,000 people, that was an extremely small sampling of the population of this country to say that that's what we all think.
Right.
I guess that's why I tend to feel like ideas when it comes to politics butting up against science, I kind of feel like it's top down. People think, excuse me, we tend to be what we hear in reports is, Senator Johnson, just making up a name, Senator Johnson says he's going to vote this way for his constituents. Well, maybe if he says that's what his constituents want, then in part, I think perhaps some of his constituents whose opinions weren't, taken into account. Maybe no one called to ask them. They didn't fill out any kind of questionnaires, so they go, "Oh, well, these are what the other people who voted for Senator Johnson want, so that must be what I want too." Maybe not so blindly following, but I think it's kind of a subtle twist people can have in their opinions on things like that. It's like, oh, well, the other people who vote the same way I feel on some issues seem to want this, so over time you tend to adopt what you think your peers have adopted, which makes me think, well, maybe a lot of those people, that wasn't their idea in the first place, and it just kind of subtly gets pushed upon them and adopted by them. And again, that's a lot of speculation. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I guess just like observing people I have known who will kind of take up a cause passively, if you will, like not that they're out run around with protest signs or anything, but over time I start hearing them talk about something that they support or believe in. I think this doesn't seem like anything you would have ever, what I've known of you for 10, 20 years, however long I've known someone, doesn't seem like something you would have necessarily picked up on your own. So I wonder if that's not perhaps where that, at least in part, where that happens.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, even though Senator so and so is he's going to vote for or against something. I mean, there's without knowing if if his constituents sent him letters, if it came out of a newspaper editorial, that's supposed to be a route of getting these guys' attention. Uh, if this is a just he ran on a anti-science platform. I mean, so the majority in his area decided, yeah, I'm opposed to science, and this is the guy I want. So exactly knowing exactly the background. I mean, yeah, you'll never know. I mean, it would think, you know, I see one of the things that seems to get lost in this um, how our government works is, I mean, these guys are wanting to get reelected. I mean, that's all they're interested in. They they're looking for term 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they're going to get, and they can't be ticking off their voting base.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm again, that's I mean, again, so the
It's
way
un-
they're voting.
it's unfortunate that our lawmaking is such a business. It's such an. Like it is. Like
Yeah.
so you're elected to a lawmaking body, and it's now your business to be reelected, to stay there doing what you're doing. It becomes a career. Um, but I actually had a conversation about that the other day. And I said, it's easy to say, well, there should be term limits on, like, say, we'll just say the representatives. So you impose some term limit. Maybe it's 12 years. Just I'm throwing an arbitrary number out. Well, to get elected, you have to say the things. You have to represent the things that majority of voters want, or at least um, represent the antithesis of what they don't want. So you get elected, and now you have to, uh, you're in the business of pleasing your constituents so that you're elected again for until you make your 12 years, right? Well, then you also have the problem like people would be cycling in and out of Congress. You'd always have new people, and I assume that like the newest, like if I've never been elected before, I'm brand new to Congress. A lot of that's going to be there's going to be a learning curve to some extent. How everything happens, how everything functions on Capitol Hill, because I'm sure there's a lot that goes on that we don't see, and that's not to say it's you know mustache twisting backroom deals necessarily. Just that there's a lot of things that go on there that may not be obvious. Um, and with people cycling in and out, I would think it would maybe stymie progress somewhat. It could, if you always have a large number of new people there. Um, so there certainly doesn't seem like a really perfect answer to that.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm actually opposed to term limits,
Mm-hmm.
basically because, and knowing that it is an old boys school where, I mean, these guys get elected, they, I mean, they get elected, and the people want to keep them there. So, like the guys like Strom Thurmond and those guys, that the Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, he's been always getting reelected, getting in there. And it's because their constituency likes the guy and
Mm-hmm.
believe that I mean, I would hope that they made their decision based on facts to put him in. So, and these guys have been in there forever, 20, 30 years. And,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, I think it's the clout thing that bothers some people, but it's it is it's a dealing thing, and you know, I mean well, there was that oh the uh, when I first started voting, we had Illinois had a senator, Charles Percy, and and he was the incumbent and ran against Paul Simon, and not the musician, but
You just knew you could feel the joke coming on, couldn't you?
yeah, well that was the joke. The guy was Simon was Paul Simon, Paul Simon the musician, and Paul Simon the senator was on Saturday Night Live.
Hmm.
Okay, but Simon ran a kind of a dirty campaign, and and about this time, now Percy was like right on. He was about ready to get his. I forget if it was his second. I think it was his second term. He was running for his second term. And this was about the time there was a collider going to be built. It ended up being they started to build it in Texas. It's that one that they got about halfway through and ran out of money and
Right.
killed the project.
Hmm.
Well, that was the two choices was to be build it here in Illinois, actually, probably not too far from where I live and back home, and of course the Texas site. And Percy had been pushing because it meant construction jobs and government money to build it, and then the research money to operate it. So it was going to mean a lot of money to Illinois, but for whatever reason, Simon, he got elected, and needless to say, the project went to Texas, which they proceeded to overrun and pretty much destroy the project.
Hmm.
But if Percy would, and it was almost a guarantee. I mean, it was just now whether or not it would have happened, but I would think if Percy got elected, we would have gotten that construction project. And Illinois was hurting for jobs. I don't think Texas at the time was hurting for work because the gas and oil has always been pretty.
Even today, it still
Yeah,
makes for a lot of jobs.
yeah.
Same
I
thing
mean,
here, even.
yeah, I mean, actually, our office just opened one in Tulsa just to pick up work down there
Hmm.
because we got an office in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I'm just amazed at just everything, all the oil, oil related, all the industry base, related to it. I mean, even um, just the safety clothes, the safety equipment. I mean, there's these huge stores selling safety equipment to to the refineries, or people working in refineries. Up here, I mean, I literally have to do an online order to get my FR stuff.
Hmm.
But I'm getting back on subject here a little bit. That idea, the having these guys. I mean, if the guys are doing their job, they're getting stuff for their constituents. They're getting the federal money into the state. Um, Getting laws that the constituents want. I mean, there shouldn't be a problem keeping them in office. I mean,
Hmm.
if they screw up for some reason, yeah, I mean, the voters should kick them out, and that's our job. The voters' job is to kick these guys out.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a shame that only maybe 10 or 15% of those eligible to vote. I mean, that's the sadder story is, you know, I mean, I've looked at some numbers. I mean, in the county that I live in, only 20% of registered voters voted for in the presidential elections.
Hmm.
I mean, that's usually the biggest turnouts they get is during the presidential years. Because even when you get into the because we Illinois, I think it's like they vote in November and is it April, May. There's a spring election. There's a fall election, and those elections only. I mean, when I looked at the numbers, it was like 10 to 15% vote. It's like, and then all these times there's always some type of referendum that a tax referendum.
Mm-hmm.
So only 15% of the people are deciding tax issues. That's like, you know,
That makes a good point, because I was just thinking a minute ago along that line. Uh, One of our unfortunately famous congressmen here is Tom Coburn. I'm sure you've heard the name before,
yeah,
because that dude says some crazy bullshit. And I think to myself, when I hear some of the things he says, I'm like, man, that does not represent the mindset of so many people I meet and so many people I know here in this state. But then, I guess it doesn't have to. If a small percentage of people are the ones voting, then it only has to really represent that small percentage, doesn't it?
yeah,
Um, Pretty much. I mean, I still vote because it's the thing to do. But it's almost like my opinion. The way I vote on a lot of issues here in Oklahoma, it's gonna basically be discounted, because I will tend to vote against the norm here. But if only, say, even 20% of registered voters are voting on something, then that's only that 20% that needs to think some of the crazy shit that this guy may think, or that or support close enough to what he thinks that there he can go on with. I don't want to say his agenda, but not, again, not to say that's like some evil agenda, but he has his mindset and the things he's going to say and do. And
yeah,
if he gets the vote by just that small amount of people that are voting, then I guess that's all it really takes.
yeah. And that's what he's going to walk in and says, well, my constituents put me here. This is
Right.
what I'm going to vote. And I mean, and that's how it's supposed to work. And I mean, until I mean, I vote mainly because I can say, hey, I voted. I mean, I made my choice.
Uh-huh.
You know, if you didn't vote, you know, you know, they, I kind of agree that if you didn't vote, you have no opinion. If you don't like the guy, you didn't vote. You're the one who, by not voting, you voted. You just didn't
Right.
vote for anybody.
Well, and right along that line, something I've told people is, and in fact, in my own family, is where I think I started telling my family members this. Like, okay, so my dad would say he wouldn't vote years and years ago. I'm not going to vote because I don't like the choices. I said, well, why don't you do this then? So, like, say in senator, like congressional elections or state legislature or even the presidential elections. So you have these two choices and you don't like either one. Okay, vote on something else on that same ballot and don't fill out either choice for that. It'd be nice if there was a column for I don't like either of these choices, but I have turned in ballots where, especially local questions, I'll vote my opinion on local questions. And there's somewhere where your voice actually has considerably more effect than a national election. And then on those same ballots, I will leave some choices empty because I don't like either choice, and I feel like that's my way of actually saying, okay, I submitted a ballot that says I don't like either of these two choices, and I voted on these things I want. And I suppose not everyone would see that as a good way to vote, and I've had a few people tell me they didn't think that was okay, but to me that's better than not doing it at all. I think
Yeah.
than sitting at home going, well, screw it, I'm not going to do it because I don't like those choices. Well, then go tell them you don't like those choices, because otherwise they can just make the assumption that you didn't care. Like someone somewhere, when they're looking at numbers of people who vote, can say, oh well, we had 1,000 people that could have voted, perhaps 100 of them turned out. I guess these other 900 didn't care. If you're not there turning in ballots and say, here's what I want, and then leaving columns blank, and again, maybe someone could just say, they didn't care here. I don't know. That's why I wish there was a way to put on the ballot. I don't like these choices.
None of the above type thing.
Yeah, yeah. I, I can't I can't completely I can't say it's a completely invalid point if someone says I don't vote because I don't like the choices. I get that, and I don't entirely know what to do about that. I don't really have any great suggestion for how to fix that. One might say, well, go run for office yourself. Okay, well, that's not a viable option for everyone.
Right.
It's like not everyone can pick up that torch and run with it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's how, at least up until now, that's how I've
I mean,
tackled that problem. So if I don't like the choices, I'll vote on everything that I feel I have an opinion I can put down on the ballot. So,
I mean, I guess it's a personal choice. I mean, I can't fault a person for doing what they do, and their reasoning. I mean, you almost can't, when they're trying to make a decision like that.
mhm.
But I do. It would be nice if either there was a none of the above, and that would force some type of a recount or reelection type thing or something like that,
or at least,
or
it would force a body, a governing body, or some group to say, hey, let's look at this. Why are so many people saying we don't like these choices?
yeah, or something, or I mean, I don't know what it's like in other states, but I know Illinois, you can do a write-in, though there's some weird stuff.
I don't think you can do that here either. Pretty
I think
sure.
because I think you can write in. There's something weird. I mean, if I think there is a kind of a safety thing about that the person who you write in has to have at least somehow declared that they're running,
Hmm.
but they don't have to get on. They don't have to be. There's some. You know, I think it's just to protect. If someone voted for Mickey Mouse, because apparently that. The Disney characters seem to get a lot of votes. So
Not Looney Tunes?
I wonder. I remember them. There was, I think, Mickey Mouse was one of the top vote getters. In the write-ins. I'm trying to remember.
Hmm. I know here you can't. I'm registered independent, and you cannot vote in primaries if you're registered independent. Um, Often that hasn't mattered to me because I wasn't particularly crazy about either candidate that was on the ballot in primaries anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, see, Illinois. I think you only have the. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I know you can get the. You could declare Republican or Democrat. I don't know if there's any other choices, but then there's like two parts of the. You got the Republican ballot, then you got the general election type thing where because the primaries are in the spring, and that's usually the time when the libraries and the schools ask for money.
mhm.
So then there's a section for all the referendums and things like that.
Right. And that right there is what I tell people when I will talk to someone who doesn't like the choices offered for legislation or for legislative elections. I'm like, well, okay, if you feel that strongly, then at least go vote on local questions like tax allocation and things like that. Do schools get more money? Do the libraries get more money? Or those kind of questions. Like those are things, and your voice is one among a much smaller crowd, so you can actually feel like you're making you're helping make that
No.
decision.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I guess I'm going to wrap this up for today. If you are, um, I have the
Yeah. I
feeling
guess
next week's going to be bigger. I know
I
Johan and
hope
Erno
so.
will be here. Hopefully, Lauren will be here as well. We have to work. We're going to have to start bugging people to join us here on the weekends. So, last weekend was really good. I think we had 8 people last weekend, if I
Five
remember
or
correctly.
We had quite a few.
Yeah, it was pretty good size. I mean, 10's the max we can get. I was actually afraid that this weekend we'd have more people wanting in than we'd be able to handle, and we had quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
It's
All
mostly
right.
just been us on tangential points the entire times. But that's okay. All
Uh,
right, well,
yeah.
Mike, have a happy rest of your birthday and a
Thank
good
you.
week. And I will talk to you between now and then. I will see you next weekend.
Yes.
All right,
See y'all
whoever
next
our one
weekend.
viewer is, thank you for watching for the better part of this show. So, all right, take care, everyone.
Yeah. Later.